Hello, hello, how are you? This is Kinesiology 214, and we are still in the module where we are talking about evaluating performance, and this is specific to cardiovascular fitness. And earlier we talked about ways to assess muscular fitness or muscular strength, and I also had a little overview. This is more about cardiovascular fitness. And really what's been kind of a watershed moment in this industry has been the ability to have clients with great ease provide data on the spot to a practitioner. Wearables have allowed the immediate flow of data from the person participating in an exercise program to the person who is implementing that program instantaneously. There are many different methods, there are many different apps, there are many different programs to do this. Uh, there are several that I use with my clients just because some people are more particular to a particular brand than another. Um, I like my zone myself. It's just one that I use for my own workouts, and it's pretty easily integrated into any club setting. And what's been great too is these data points have not only included just heart rate while working out, but they've also included things that are pretty important to determine, like the general state of your client. How are their sleep habits? What kind of rest and other activities are they doing? How active are they during the day? And there are other data points that you'll see that have equal importance that really were unknown until maybe 4 or 5 years ago. So, heart rate itself is a pretty important part of this and a key component in determining just how much you want to work with your clients. And the three main ones I'm just going to go over in this presentation. There are many others, but resting heart rate is a great tool to determine just how fit the person is. Um, Specifically, as it sounds, resting heart rate is when you wake up in the morning, you take your pulse, determine how many beats you have per minute at rest, and that's a key component to many different um, formula that are used to calculate workloads for heart rate. And this is not going to be an exhaustive compare these different formulas. That's not what this is going to be about. Time to recovery. This is one that I like to use on my clients, and I use it within the context of a training session where I work with the client and we work pretty hard, and then we work on how quickly they can recover. And then heart rate variability is another tool that's come about as a direct result of people having wearables on a regular basis. And it's a wonderful tool to determine just like which part of the central nervous system is running a show. Is it the sympathetic or parasympathetic system? And we just didn't have those data points before. So let me get my face out of here. So when you look at the circulatory system, the heart rate's the pump in that system. I think we talked about that earlier on in the first part of the term. And when you look at this, blood comes out of the heart, it services the muscles with oxygenated blood, goes to the muscles, goes to the bones, goes to the organs, and then comes back into the heart, pump to the lungs, lungs to the heart, heart to the body. And the way I often describe this to my clients is you have a red line and you have a blue line. It works really well in Chicago because we have a red, a blue, a brown, and a pink, and an orange and a green line. But for our sake, we have a red line and a blue line, and the red line is taking red passengers, that's the oxygenated blood, out to the muscles, out to the organs, and it's bringing people back on the blue line. And you do have two of them, right? So you have a red line and a blue line, one that oxygenates the heart and one that oxygenates the rest of the body. So keep in mind that you can oversimplify this. It's better to oversimplify this for your clients because it can be pretty complicated. Just think red line, blue line. Red takes blood to the muscles where it's serviced, and deoxygenated blood comes back into the heart. So when you look at resting heart rate, and the way I describe this to clients is, you have a certain amount of beats that are needed to send blood through the system. Your body requires at rest oxygen to be brought and waste products to be taken away. And so your body needs a certain volume of blood to make that happen. As the heart works more efficiently, it's able and better able to contract more and more blood with every squish. So every contraction, squish, is part of the system, and that pump squeezes blood out with every contraction. So as the heart is squeezing blood out in a resting state, that's how much oxygenated blood and nutrients your body needs. But the other side of this equation is it's also the rate at which your body is expending CO2 and waste products. And that's part of the process in terms of how you oxygenate the muscles and then bring the waste products away from the muscles. So usually you see a lower resting heart rate is seen in fitter individuals, and this is usually because they have better cardiac efficiencies. And each contraction can then bring a greater amount of blood. So to do 5 liters of blood through the body, you don't need 70 beats to make that happen. You can do it in 50. And the process there is, you think in terms of you're just more efficient. Your heart's better at squeezing out more blood. Now there are sometimes where this doesn't actually hold true. You might have somebody who's on a beta blocker, for example, and it's controlling their heart rate and it's not allowing them to have an elevated heart rate, maybe above 100 beats per minute. That will also skew the heart rate on the other end of the equation, the resting heart rate. And you also might have some people who just have bradycardia, meaning a reduced heart rate in the family, and it's just part of it. But in general, the fitter the person, the lower the heart rate. So when you look at calculations, let me just go ahead and pull this guy down here. When you look at calculations, this is a pretty standard format, right? So you have this 220 minus your theoretical maximal heart rate. A person is 40 years old. That gives you an age-predicted maximal heart rate. And if you work at 80%, 80% is 144 beats per minute. And what they've done is they've color codified the system, right? So you have very easy 50 to 60, light 60 to 70%, 70 to 80%, 80 to 90%, 90 to 100. So we know that this person at 144 beats per minute based off of their age, they're at about 80% workload. Well, 80% puts them right here in this kind of mustard yellow color. And usually it goes gray, blue, green, yellow, red. And you'll have this anaerobic threshold is kind of the cutoff point that most of them use to take, or when state clients are working harder. Now, some of them actually offer a point system and a value to this, where it's 4 points, 4 points, 3 points, 2 points, 1 point for every minute you spend in there, and then you have this kind of point tally where you can challenge other people and have contests in terms of how many points you earn, meaning how long you stay in the red and the yellow. So let's take this a step further, right? When a person starts to work out, you have increased demands on the body. So as soon as you start working out, your body is requiring more blood to be circulated, more circulation to blow off waste products, and more circulation to bring nutrients and oxygenated blood to the muscles. So the pump then in the body, the heart gets the call to increase circulation, and this happens in anticipation of an exercise bout, actually. And once the bout of exercise is completed, then the system begins to reset and the heart rate comes back down. So, I have clients who wear heart rate monitors, and what we do is we use that as a feedback tool. And we use that as a tool, or we try to work them to a particular workload, and then we work on recovering them back, and then we go back, recover, work, recover over and over and over again in an interval style fashion. So when we do this, it's a wonderful tool that's used to help kind of measure that recovery, but it's also a tool to kind of balance that out. So if we take this a step further and we look at this example, we go with our 40-year-old from earlier, we know they're 180 beats per minute for their age predicted. And if we take them at a 90% workload, that's going to put them up in the red here. Well, it's going to be 162 beats per minute. They work out, they get done with that bout of exercise, they hit their 162, we hold them there maybe for a minute or as long as they can tolerate, and then we recover them back to 75% recovery level, which will put them back in the green, or 135 beats per minute. So one of my clients is a competitive shooter, and part of his competitive shooting is he has to go from stage to stage to stage, transition, pull out his gun, shoot, 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 then run across, shoot, shoot, shoot. So what we have to do is we have to work him in these stages and get him in the position where he can learn how to recover and actually have that fight or flight switch to rest and digest, right? And you'll hear me talk about this in a second. So really what we're doing with him is we're trying to take him from a very heightened state, and we're trying to take him and pull his heart rate back down and have him have more control over his heart rate. And you can have more control over your heart rate. It's not like you're just beholden to the exercise itself. You can do things to help meter back and pull back that heart rate. I ran track in college. I played football and ran track, but I ran track and I ran 400, and that's a pretty grueling event. And part of what I would do is the last 100 meters, as I was coming around that last curve, I would literally put my head somewhere else. When I was much younger, we grew up on a lake, and the lake had a rope swing that was tied to a tree, and I would literally visualize. I could see the track and everything in front of me, and I'm running. I was aware of the competitors around me, of course, not in front of me. They were all behind me, if you know what I'm saying. And as I was running, I would visualize that rope swing and that tree and that lake, and that would basically shut down the fight or flight response and pull me more into rest and digest. And really what I was trying to do is quiet the sympathetic nervous system and really activate the parasympathetic nervous system more so I could then just shut down the stressors that are on my body because there were some pretty heavy stressors on my body from running the 400. So it's a kind of a play where you can do a little bit of work and kind of control your heart rate and control the sympathetic and parasympathetic to an extent. So when we talk heart rate variability, this is one that's pretty cool. I really like this as a way to evaluate. When you look at these QRS complexes, that's what this is called. When the heart contracts, you have a PQRS complex. And the QRS itself, when you look at it, the heart contracts, boom. And when it contracts, you have the electrical impulse that goes through the heart to make that happen. And so that is measured by this peak. So you can measure the distance in between heart rates by the peaks here. And what they're doing is they're showing in terms of milliseconds, 859 milliseconds, 793 milliseconds, 726. It looks like normal sinus rhythm, it looks like 1 a second. But in actuality, if you looked at the number beneath, if you were to calculate it out, the beats per minute number is actually a little bit different. Okay, so that means shorter distance in between means the heartbeats are coming faster, which means there's more beats per minute. Okay, cool, got it. Now, this was data that was not available until people started wearing heart rate monitors, and you could do this in a lab environment, but it was just not functional to have somebody come out with a 12 lead EKG and try to do this in a gym setting. Now, this is totally doable, and it's really a cool concept. And this gets back to what I was talking about with the parasympathetic and sympathetic, right? This provides information for the person and the practitioner to really get an idea of where the person is, what part of the autonomic nervous system is in control. Is it the sympathetic? Is it the fight or flight? Or is it the parasympathetic rest or digest? So think it through in terms of my client who's shooting, or like when I was running 400. I was trying to trick my body into more rest and digest as I clearly was in a fight or flight scenario running. Same thing with my client who's a shooter. So when you look at the two branches between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, when the sympathetic is active, your heart rate increases, you have increase in force contraction, and you also have an increase in blood pressure, which makes sense if your force of contraction also increases. But the variability decreases. So what you see is people who have a low variability in heart rate, and it's like a consistent boom, 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 0.59 or 0.859, 0.859, 0.859. Usually with those individuals, they're in a situation where the sympathetic nervous system is firing. Now, when you look at it from here and you look at it in terms of the parasympathetic, you'll have an increase of variability. You'll have variation between the different heart rates. And as you have a decrease in heart rate and the force of contraction decreases, with the parasympathetic, what you're after is you'd like to have your body kind of operate from the parasympathetic side and have that higher heart rate variability, and you're more in a rest and digest as opposed to fight or flight. So it kind of becomes important when we talk about like general adaptation syndrome like we did before. There's so many stressors that are placed on our bodies: school, work, family, driving to school, driving to work. And then this presents the opportunity to have a sympathetic system really kind of take control and really be on overdrive and have our bodies kind of be in a stress state all the time. Well, this can have a negative effect. They have a negative effect in terms of how we live our lives, but also just in terms of stressors like cortisol going through our body. So what you try to do as a trainer and a practitioner is this: you take an inventory of where your client is, and a wearable that shows you heart rate variability is very, very nice to have, because it tells you perhaps your client is coming in an overstressed state and a crushing workout is not warranted. Perhaps rest, regen, recuperation, perhaps some rolling, stretching, yoga moves. Those are the types of things that you do instead of a high intensity interval training program, as a way to help your client get out of the sympathetic driven nervous system and get more into the parasympathetic side. So with that, guys, I'm signing off. Have a good one. See you later.